All right, guys, welcome to our first session of notes together. Obviously, this is how it's going to be for a little bit here, me just kind of talking. I have the PowerPoints up behind me, behind my face, I should say. This is how we're just going to do. I'm just going to kind of explain the stories that go with what we're talking about. And again, this is week one, and this is the week one finishing the war in Europe. So obviously, we're going to finish our PowerPoint today. We're going to go from we last talked about D-Day all the way up till the victory in Europe, and then we're going to pause right before the Holocaust, and we'll have a separate series of notes for the Holocaust. So today is all about just wrapping up what happens in Europe. Okay, so switching gears now, actually into the notes. When we last talked, it was D-Day. We know it was successful, considering what we watched and what I kind of explained is how the amphibious assaults, again, is when you try to invade someone coming from water onto the land. It's really tough to do, really challenging, and we kind of saw video of that. So, um, that being said, the Americans, the British, and the Canadians are successful in their D-Day invasions. We're successful in Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3, which is holding the beachheads and then pushing out towards the different towns in France that are on the coast. Let's see if I can skip ahead here again. So on July 30th, Patton is finally given command again, and he's going to take his frustrations out on the Germans. So after D-Day is successful, Patton is back in control, and when Patton takes over, he basically just rips through the Germans and really fast, and he's really successful at it. And as you can see there, within a month's time of him taking over, Paris and basically France is all back in Allied hands. So after D-Day, the Germans are kind of constantly on the retreat. It's kind of the beginning of the end. Once D-Day occurs and the second front is open, so now they're fighting the Russians on the eastern front, and now they're fighting the Allies on the western front. It's too much for the Germans to handle, and it's just kind of a slow collapse from this point on. Now, they do have one last gasp, okay? The Germans and Hitler in particular are going to bet it all at the Battle of the Bulge, okay? Now, this is their last chance. Going into the battle, it's very unlikely that they're going to be successful, but without trying, Germany has no chance. So this is kind of their Hail Mary, okay? This is kind of their buzzer beater shot to try to win the game. Is it going to go in? We'll have to wait and see. So again, the whole goal is to show enough force. The Germans try to show enough force possible to force the Allies to sign a truce by repelling them out of Europe. All right, the Germans outnumber the Allies, but at this point, the Germans have been fighting for so long that they're tired, they're weak. A lot of their soldiers at the start of the war are no longer alive or they're no longer fighting. So the people that the Germans have fighting at the end of World War II is basically anybody that can hold a gun. Okay? Doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. If you can fight, you're signing up. All right? Sadly enough, though, Hitler and the Germans came real close to winning. The Battle of the Bulge was real close to being successful, but it ends up failing at the end. Now, the main reason why it fails is a lot of the fighting that takes place at the Battle of the Bulge is in the Ardennes forest in Germany. So we know with Blitzkrieg, it's all about speed. Okay, so the ideal location for the Germans to fight would be in a wide open field with nothing in between, so they can use their motorized units and their speed to their advantage. Well, if we're in a forest, obviously there's a bunch of stuff, mainly trees, in the way. So you cannot use your speed to your advantage. And that's kind of what happens with the Germans. Okay, they kind of get bogged down, they get slowed down, which allows the Allies time to prepare and thus execute the game plan, and that's what they do. Okay, if let's say the Battle of the Bulge took place in an open area, the Germans would have for sure would have won the battle, but that's not what happened. Okay, so after the Battle of the Bulge, it's officially kind of the end of the fighting piece in World War II, and now it's going to be kind of a mad scramble. All right, it's going to basically be Patton and the Russians, and they're going to see who can take Berlin first, because whoever kind of gets Berlin will have a lot more chips that he can take at the end when we're talking about the peace negotiations. Okay, so whoever can kind of take Berlin will kind of have the leg up on that. And we also talked about Patton being a glory hound, where if you want to become, if you want your names in the papers, taking Berlin will get you there. But let's continue on. So since 1942, the U.S. and Britain have been bombing the Germans. Unlike the Germans, the U.S. were heavy on strategic bombing. So we were not constantly bombing their civilian targets. We were actually choosing military targets, where Germany was actively trying to bomb London. Civilian targets. The United States, we were actively trying to bomb military targets. Industrial factories, oil refineries, bridges, roads, stuff like that. And we had the best bomber plane in World War II. It's called B-17. It's the Flying Fortress. It's its nickname. And it becomes that because it's so massive that, well, for example, an ordinary bomber, you'd have your bomber planes, and you'd also have your little fighter jets or your fighter planes with it to protect the bomber, okay? But the Flying Fortress is so massive, and it has so many guns on the plane itself that you don't need any other escort little fighters with it. It can handle its own business, okay? So with that, it kind of really signifies that, okay, United States has air supremacy, and they're going to keep it until the end of the war. All right, eventually, England, though, they start to target civilian targets, just like Germany did with London. We're going to see England start to actually hunt and seek out and bomb civilian targets, mainly big cities in Germany. Probably a little bit of payback for the Blitz, or the Battle of Britain. And one of the stories is the city of Dresden. Now, Dresden is Germany's second largest city, in World War II. And in one situation that comes up, it's called the Sad Story of Dresden. Basically, the city gets bombed, and it gets firebombed by the British. And so what happens is the city literally turns into an oven. The whole city's on fire. Even up to 1,000 degrees is how hot some of the temperatures were recorded. The end result, 66,000 Germans get baked alive, civilians, might I add. Up to 300,000 killed afterwards. And again, it's kind of tough to tell because, if you're burned so bad and you turn to ashes, we can't count that body unless someone counts it. It's kind of like the Battle of Kursk, where the tank battle, it's tough to kind of get the actual figures because people are literally missing, okay, because they're no longer there. They're incinerated. All right, and you can see almost 1 million people get homeless at the end of it because the whole city literally burns to the ground. And here's some pictures to go with that, kind of showcase it all. And this is one that kind of shows it the best. Okay, so literally the whole city gets destroyed. And again, the bombing is done by the British, not by the Americans, but definitely some payback for them bombing London early on in the war. All right, we can skip ahead to rockets. We don't even know that. Here's just some casualties, some stats if you're interested. And the big thing there is air power did not win the war, but it was necessary to win the war. So if you had air power, and the Allies mainly did for a majority of the second half of the war, it does not guarantee you the win, but it gives you a really good chance at winning. Now the flip side is if you do not have air supremacy, you literally could not win the war. Okay, so it's of the utmost importance to be in control of the skies, and the Allies had that power for a majority of the second half of the war. Okay, which ultimately leads to the end. All right, so with the Russians driving in from the east and the British and the Americans from the west, Hitler is surrounded, and he decides to take the most honorable way out. And he commits suicide at the Führer's bunker with his wife, Eva Braun. All right, there's a few different ways you can do it. A lot of people took cyanide capsules, basically poisoning yourself, or people would commit suicide with a pistol. Now, this suicide thing was not just with Hitler. It was a lot of the Nazi Party did it. So here's a picture of the deputy mayor of the German town Leipzig, Ernest Lasio, his wife, and their daughter all opted for the cyanide pill over capture by the American soldiers. So this was a common theme with high-ranking officials in the Nazi Party. All right, this leads us to VE Day, which just stands for Victory in Europe Day, May 8th, 1945, the day Germany surrenders to the Allies. And again, People in America are rejoicing, people in France are rejoicing, people in Britain, people in Russia, okay? So it's a big moment. Here's some more stats of kind of losses and things like that. Here's some casualties. Each flag represents 100,000 people that had died. So for America, we're over here. We only have 2 flags, so it kind of gives you of an idea of how little we kind of lost. I know a lot of people gave the ultimate sacrifice, but if we compare the United States to like the Soviet Union over here, okay, you can just see the vast number of people, the difference. So Russia ends up losing the most, and a lot of that comes down to their military tactics and their military leadership compared to other countries, where their strategy was literally just send wave after wave after wave of men to slow the blitzkrieg down. Okay, yeah, it was successful. If you think about the outcome of the war, Russia was a part of the victors, or the Soviet Union, excuse me, was a part of the victors, but, you know, at what cost? Okay, because they lost millions and millions of people fighting this war. Okay, with the victory in Europe, we get the initial kind of conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States, and with Britain. We kind of get the beginning of the Cold War, where we're going to be dividing up Europe. And obviously, when we're talking about something that massive, it's going to have big world implications for years to come, and we're going to talk about those implications later on. Okay. One big thing we get after the victory in Europe is we get the creation of the UN, which the whole idea was to hopefully have all these countries meet all the time so we can avoid World War III. So far, so good. We also know that after World War I, we created a thing called the League of Nations, very similar to the UN, but that whole goal was to not have World War II happen, which ultimately that one failed. Okay, so they kind of adjusted it, made some changes, and then created the UN afterwards, and it's still working pretty good today. And then that's where I'm going to leave you guys off for. Okay, we had the end of the War of Europe. America, Britain, and the Soviet Union, along with France, win. Germany falls short. Hitler commits suicide. But the thing to remember now is that's not the end of the war. Okay, that's just the end of the war in Europe. Remember how America got into this war. Pearl Harbor. Okay, so the war with Japan rages on. Okay, we still got a few more years of fighting with the Japanese, and that's what we're going to look at in our next notes. Okay, next week we're going to look at the war in the Pacific. Okay, but for this week we're just going to end off here with our notes. We finished the War of Europe. You guys will have a reading guide that kind of go with this kind of stuff. If you have any questions, email me, guys. Remember, it's just like calling me. Okay, if you email me, I get a notification on my phone right there, and I can try to get back to you. Now, from what my understanding is, this is only day 2 of you guys not being here when I'm recording this, and to my understanding, I'm only going to be here from 8 until 3. So that's the best time to reach me. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee you I can get back to you. But from 8 to 3, I'm on your guys' clock. I'm here to answer your questions, help you guys out. Feel free to email me, do whatever you need to get in contact with me to make sure we can still be learning as much as we possibly can. All right, that's all I got, guys. Hopefully you made it to the end, right? Because, again, we are still here to learn, and hopefully you guys are responsible in doing that. But until next time, I'll see you.